What's the most not safe for work thing you've seen happen in a workplace? Once I caught one of the cleaning ladies getting banged by our barman in a refrigerated cell. They were both naked and going at it while under 0 degrees Celsius. A well-qualified female was promoted to be a line supervisor at a manufacturing facility I worked at years ago. One of the men on the line was rather upset that he'd have to be reporting to a woman. When the newly promoted line supervisor was making her first review/inspection of the line, he dropped his pants and underpants and waved his dong at her in defiance. Her first administrative act as supervisor was to terminate his employment. I walked into the office kitchen and had a female work colleague take off her top and ask me what I thought of her breasts. I was a bit blindsided by this and said, "I've only come for a cup of tea. This girl is young enough to be my daughter." A few days later, she came into my office, wiggled her bum at me, and asked me what I thought of her bum. Edit, this girl was 20 plus years younger than me. Nope, I wasn't interested. I did raise the issue with the boss, who just laughed and said, "She's a character." She had resigned anyway, and I was taking over from her sans the flashing. She told me she was a model, and she couldn't show me the photos because they were not suitable for work. She had shown the photos to a very conservative sales rep, who refused to come to our office after that. I can only gather the pics were more pornographic in nature than I had assumed them to be. She spent a lot of time pole dancing in the courtyard. I'm not sure she was wearing underwear beneath her short skirt. Lots of people have commented on my cup of tea. Yes, I am British. Worked in an emergency room, and I can tell you that a good number of the nurses and paramedics were having affairs and just having rampant sex with each other. I remember one specific time walking by a patient room and just hearing sex sounds. A few minutes later, a disheveled nurse and firefighter came strolling back to the nurse's station. A different type of not safe for work, one of the ER physicians was busted for having alcohol in his big gulp while working. Another time, we discovered one nurse in the bathroom half passed out with a needle in her arm. County hospitals are awesome. We had a row of 10 or so porta potties that started swaying uncontrollably. Turns out a couple decided that a porta potty is a discreet place to hook up. I worked in a cemetery for years. I remember one of the funeral directors was banging a receptionist, and one night she met him out in the wall crypts, and the security guard caught them with my homie's pants down. Not safe for work and hilarious. Side note, he was engaged to somebody else who worked there. The fireworks were legendary. Once I walked in on one of my patients having sex with her boyfriend. She had given birth vaginally 6 hours earlier. What? Worked at a place that had a boardroom that overlooked the factory. The boardroom windows were covered in mirror vinyl, and usually it's brighter in the factory than the boardroom, so you can't see in from the factory. After work, it's getting dark, so the lights in the boardroom are brighter than the factory, so the effect is reversed, and you can see everything in the boardroom from the factory, but can't see the factory from inside the boardroom. That's when the CEO walks into the boardroom and plows a receptionist on the boardroom table with a whole bunch of factory workers watching. We caught a 60-year-old rich, married white lady blowing a homeless guy in our bathroom during Fantasy Fest, while her husband waited outside. In her defense, I don't think she knew he was homeless. Friend was a plumber. He was installing a water heater in the roof with his assistant. He was in the roof, and the assistant was fetching him tools and passing them up the ladder. After a while, he asked his assistant for something and realized he wasn't there. So he climbed down the ladder to see where he was. Found him plowing the homeowner's maid on the kitchen table. They'd just met about 1 hour earlier. I managed a bar 2 years ago. I had this girl that bartended for me who would go missing on camera all the time. I had cameras everywhere inside. She'd just disappear for half an hour at a time. I investigated. I was pretty close with a lot of the regulars, small family-owned place in a suburb, and came to find out that she'd been, offering sex for money, soliciting sex from behind my bar. She was gone shortly thereafter. I couldn't fire her for something that I couldn't prove. I ended up letting her go for neglecting to fulfill her duties as a bartender. She was written up for multiple occasions of leaving the bar customers unattended, and that was enough to get her the hell out. I don't know if that could somehow fall back on me or the bar, but I was not interested in finding out. Edit. I can't reply to all of the "yes you can" replies individually, so I'll do it here. Yes, I could have fired her for anything I wanted. If she wore a pair of shoes I didn't like, I could fire her on the spot. But the dynamic changes a little bit when you're in a small town. Drama spreads fast. She would have complained to someone about it along the line, and half the community would have ended up boycotting the bar. The other half would have thought very lowly of her. I don't see how either of those things are good for anyone. So I held off and fired her for something else. I didn't want to deal with that kind of confrontation. Not gonna lie, the whole situation was pretty uncomfortable. I walked in on two coworkers having sex. The guy just said, "Hey, what's up?" like it was nothing. Sadly, it didn't work out for them. He pulled a gun on her in the parking lot a few months later. Honorable mention to the time I caught an employee getting fingered by a customer in a stairwell. Worked in a hospital ER, had a patient come in for vaginal pain, worked her up and positioned her in the stirrups so the doctor could come in and do a quick pelvic exam. Right after I did that, a critical patient came in that required the doc's attention for a while. After about 20 minutes, I went back into the pelvic exam patient's room to apologize for the wait and put the stirrups back down so she could lay normally until the doctor had time to examine her. I walked in to her boyfriend on his knees in front of her, eating her out. Asked him what the hell he was doing, and he told me he just couldn't resist with her in that position. I escorted him to the waiting room and told security he wasn't allowed back in. Turns out she had chlamydia. Shocker. Edit. Wow, this blew up after I went to sleep. Thanks for the awards. Also, for clarification, since many people seem to be appalled that I left this perfectly capable 30-year-old woman in stirrups for 20 minutes, I work in county ER night shift. So when a critical patient comes in, it's all hands on deck, since we only have 3 nurses and a doc. Was a little preoccupied doing CPR to stop and tell a patient it might be a while. I worked at a Nissan dealership located at a busy intersection in my city back in the early 2000s. One of the younger car salesmen was trying to sell a new car to a woman who looked to be in her 40s. It was going well, they were working on closing the deal. So I take a break and walk to the back car lot for a smoke to find the salesman wedged between 2 cars among a row of cars with the woman he was selling a car to on her knees, giving him a blowjob. I was in complete shock. She never stopped, and he just smiled and gave me a thumbs up. I'm a 36-year-old female and still think of this one often enough. Ugh. A bonding day for the entire production staff. It's basically 4 to 6 hours at a hotel with access to the pool, gym, sports fields, and a few organized activities that are aimed to raise morale. Now, you're not supposed to bring alcohol. In fact, it's technically forbidden. But as long as you're not a complete moron, the management looks the other way. Walk into a toilet to see 1 woman and 3 guys going at it. It was definitely consensual. I wasn't the first to see it and wasn't the last. Too drunk to realize that they should probably lock the door at least. Management looked the other way. At my gym, a hired trainer ran out of the bathroom butt naked, dong in hand, stroking and screaming at the top of his lungs. He blew the most ridiculously sized load I've ever seen on the preacher curl machine, then fell over and passed out. The police and paramedics had to be called, and after they took the guy and did what they needed to do with the scene, the gym manager had to clean up the massive load off the machine. I skipped my class and just hung out there because I wanted to see how it all played out. One of my coworkers loved to wear miniskirts and go commando. I know this because our cubicle desks didn't have vanity panels, and her desk faced mine across an aisle. I didn't spend my time trying to look, mind you, but when she got on her hands and knees one day to check the wiring on her PC, it was hard not to notice. She was also either a natural redhead or very thorough. This coworker was really into me. I just didn't like her like that. But I guess she got desperate, so she goes to where I'm working in the building and she literally just flashes her boobs in front of me in the middle of the day and walks away. Work in a kitchen that is connected to a bar. 2 customers once started going at it in the ladies' room stall. The kicker, the stall was locked shut, so they had to crawl under it to get inside. Crawling on the bathroom floor instead of going to the car. That's devotion. Way back before the original .com bubble burst, I worked at this scrappy startup. It was my first real career job, and I was so intimidated by the office, the receptionist, the people in nice clothing. I thought this was the big leagues. Looking back, that place was a total freaking circus, lol. Here are some not safe for work highlights. Woman was busted for stealing Herman Miller Aran chairs and then selling them online. She had been pulling her truck up to the back and putting 6 or 7 in per run. They don't know how long she had been doing it, but they counted the chairs and we were short about 150. They did a sting, and while being arrested, she mooned everyone. We made a deadline and secured another series of funding from a hotshot investor. Founder said we should celebrate. People took it very literally. By about 10 a.m., everyone was drunk, and one creative director was demanding people take turns on the Razor scooter competing. Loser does shots. Said creative director took a spill and broke her arm. Ambulance came. Next day, the lawyers came and explained the company's new ultra-serious zero-tolerance policy regarding alcohol consumption in the office. One guy kept a bedroll and a beer fridge under his desk and I think was homeless for a while. He was at work 24/7. I've always been an early riser, and on more than one occasion, I arrived to find some random floozy in his bedroll under the desk with him, half naked, partied out, etc. I was amused, but the girls were like, wow, this is the worst walk of shame ever. There was a drug bathroom, mostly weed, no big deal, but one or two people took it too far. What takes the cake is the all-hands meeting that the founder and CFO had. He was a total rooster, typical alpha male business douche. The CFO was basically the female equivalent. Nice pantsuits, impressive salary, took no crap. We knew they were doing it in his office regularly. The door overlooked a sea of cubicles. Someone had made a secret blog that detailed each time they came out with rumpled clothes. But the kicker was that all-hands meeting, because it was to announce that the startup was failing and going to shutter its doors. They made some stupid speeches and pretended to care about all the lost jobs, said they did their best, and one guy muttered, well, maybe if you two cokeheads actually did something besides snort and bang, we'd all have jobs. A stunned hush fell over the crowd as 200 people silently went, LOL, awesome. And the CFO said, excuse me, that is uncalled for. We're going to have a chat with... And another person interrupted her and said, hey, what's that on your nose? CFO looked mortified when she wiped her nose and saw white powder. Glorious, glorious moment. We had a male call center manager that was banging girls in exchange for better schedules. This was happening on an empty floors bathroom in our building. During the same couple of years, the male sales manager was banging dudes in the same bathroom. I still wonder if they had any scheduling conflicts. Worked at a computer store. We had a repair section. Someone had a computer that kept randomly shutting down. The tech went to turn it on to test, and the entire thing caught on fire. Turns out the guy had no heatsink, had never cleaned out the inside of dust, plus the oil that got inside, and the case was covered in cooking oil. I don't know how it ended up in this state, but we had to close the repair section for a few hours while they assessed the damage. No other computers were harmed, but the repair desk needed to be replaced, as well as half the wires. I manage a pizza and wing place. On Super Bowls, we rent a refrigerated semi-truck to store backup food. This last Super Bowl came and went, and the company never came back to get the trailer. So a few of my employees decided to hotbox the entire trailer. When they got out, it looked like it was on fire from how much smoke was pouring out of it. Please leave your stories in the comments. I'd love to make a video of them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.